Welcome to Hadar's Web, a podcast featuring community conversations on spirituality, healing, justice, and art. My name is Hadar Cohen. I am your host, and I am delighted to invite you to my relational web. Today's guest is Verenice Berroa Torres. Verenice is a spiritual doula and creator. She was the first God Fellow in 2021. Welcome, Vere. It's so nice to have you here. I'm so honored.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting to talk about God.
Yes, definitely. The G word.
God.
Yes. So I'm really excited to have you here because, a few years ago, I started this program called God Fellowship, which is this 12-week immersive training in cultivating a relationship with God. And, it's a curriculum I worked years on developing. And when I decided to first launch it, I reached out to four people, like only four people that I wanted to pilot it with. And you were one of them. And I'm so glad that I did that because you were an incredible God fellow. But it was just also such an honor to get to share these teachings with you. So I wanted to first just ask you, we had this program a few years ago, but how was God Fellowship like for you? What do you remember from the course? Who is God to you now?
Ooh, wow. Okay. Good questions. Yeah, and it's funny because I'm not gonna answer. I never answer questions like linear. I always go somewhere else and somehow it connects. So, um I want to start off when you called me and invited me to God Fellowship. It was really beautiful that you did that because I believe during that time I was doing hypnotherapy training, and I had discovered in it that in our heartbeat, the spark of life lives within our hearts. And that spark of life to me is God. So to me, everyone is carrying that spark of life, which is connected to God within us. And I wasn't even thinking about souls or anything like that. I was just feeling that heartbeat, that initial spark of life as God. So I was already making this connection with God in that way. And I knew we all have God within us. Like we are creators, we are made from God. Like there's this big connection with God. But when I hang out with other people, I don't see that, or I don't make that connection, or I don't view them as such. Like this knowing is kind of separate from my day-to-day experience. So it was awesome when you invited me because I had been making these connections and I wanted to practice what it would be like to see other as God. And so it was really wonderful to have a space where I could practice that. And it was really beautiful to see so many different, I mean, we were not that many, we were just like a small crew, but it was really beautiful to see the filters and the like original, like immediate programmed um um kind of ideas of who I thought they were. Like, I think you're this way and you behave this way, so you must be that. Like I created kind of like an idea of who they were as people based on, you know, programming, based on trauma, based on what I've heard, like all these different things that were mine had informed me of who this person in front of me is. And I wasn't kind of giving them a chance to really see them for who they were because there were all these like layers, right? And I think for me, like the God Fellowship helped me notice those layers and kind of make those connections of where they were coming from, and have like a window or an opening or like a glimpse of who they were. as people, and then kind of wrap into seeing their gifts and seeing kind of the essence that they bring into the world, and holding that thread and strengthening that thread, and in that thread feeling like the divinity of it, of who they were as people.
I love that.
So that's how I answer that question. I'm like, I don't know if I answered it.
Yeah, you did. I love what you're saying. And, as you were speaking, I was reflecting on how it's so common in our world where, we have spiritual experiences, we have some spiritual awakening or process, but then we come into our world or we come into our families or our relationships and we forget, and um, all of a sudden these truths that feel so fundamental just feel so far away. And I think a lot about this process of like forgetting and remembering and how we're just constantly in that dance, and I think that's part of why I started God Fellowship because, I'm remembering in the creation story in Genesis in the Bible, there's when God creates Adam, the first human. It says, right, God created man in the image of God, which is what you were speaking about so beautifully about the spark of life. But then
Mhm.
later on, it says something else about the Hebrew is dmut, means form of God or something like that. So there's
Mhm.
actually two ways that God creates humans. One is like the image of God, and then later on we see some sort of like form of God. And commentators talk about how the image of God is something just that we're all born with. Like no matter who we are, what we are, we have that spark of God. But we don't all get to kind of embody the full realization of the
Mhm.
form of God, right? That actually requires work, that requires training, that requires something of us. And I really like that because, so often there's kind of this duality of like, well, if we're all just made in the image of God, then why do any spiritual work? Because we're just made out of that. But I think there's levels of relationship to God. And part of our job here on earth is to continuously work on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that helped, like, that's where God Fellowship came in to help me practice that. And there wasn't like there was just not a container in my life where I could be with others who agreed to do this. We are all agreeing to connect and see God with each other, like see God, and then explore with things that were happening in the world, and why would God do that, and what is God's plan here, what is this? And yeah, I feel that there wasn't a container or a space where we all, like, I just never heard of it or had connected to a space where we all came together with this understanding of exploring God with each other, you know? So I
Yeah.
thought it was pretty cool. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Feeling so special. I'm like, oh my.
totally. And yeah, I think that there's so much around spirituality and isolation, right? Like sometimes it's like in order to work on myself, I need to like isolate, or even just in how modern therapy, a lot of times it's like, oh, I need to go into this private room and close the door. And yeah, I mean, there's something I am so gravitated towards community processes and community practices. It's not to say that we're doing this fellowship because we know all about God. God remains so mysterious. Even to me, after many years of teaching God fellowship, it's like it's more organized around like, here are some practices we might try, of ways to cultivate our hearts or our minds, and let's practice it together and let's see what that's like. And um, yeah, I just find that space of spiritual practice and community where it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to try, it's okay to share different parts that are coming up for each of us. It's like so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see that, imagine and feel that to try to understand God, we need like a huge collective, right? Like all of us actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not something that you do in isolation. I mean, it feels like it's not something you do in isolation, that you do with other, um, especially those challenging connections or challenging interactions, or ways of moving through the intensity of other people, right? That could trigger us. Like how could you be part of the creator? How is that possible?
Yeah.
So there's like this big challenge of like, well, now you did something bad, so you're not part of the creator. You're separate. You're
Mhm.
not part of us, and that's I think I like to challenge myself in that a lot, and it's very difficult. It's very hard. So the practice is important.
Yeah.
And I know that you've done many God fellowships from the first. What is a practice that you feel that you've carried on throughout?
Mhm.
And it's like, yep, it's unwavering, like you're just grounded in that principle, and you continue to bring it forward in other God fellowships. What is that, if you can
Yeah.
share?
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that question. Well, I really resonate with what you just shared. And, the first teaching in God Fellowship, the first class is God is everything, like everything that happens, every interaction, every moment, it's every time, it's every space, it's every being. There's really nothing separate from it. And I think we all have these tendencies to separate things out because our minds cannot understand exactly as you were saying, like, how could this part that's so ugly and so messy really be of God? I have to, or like, how can this experience that happened to me really be part of this spiritual process, And we either segregate or we, suppress certain things. And that actually limits the way life communicates with us. And I think the teaching and the practice for me is to really, and it requires so much surrender and so much humility to say, like, whatever's happening, whatever I'm going through, there's something deeper here for me. There's some message, there's something that is of God. And part of my task is to find it, and to stay with it until I find it. I remember there was a friend who shared this story of when she was teaching something, and a student came up to her later and just insulted her, just like said something really horrible to her. And the teacher said, I'm going to sit with you until I find the place in me that can thank you for that. And we
Mm.
might sit here for a long time. And I just think about that a lot because I'm just like, okay, what is it like to just sit with all the defenses and all the reactivity and just let those things pass so that we can come to a deeper anchor? That's, definitely one teaching. And then another one that I think is related, which is in some ways the heart of every spiritual tradition, is to let the heart lead, and when I designed the curriculum, which is based on mind, body, and heart, or consciousness work and energy work, and devotion, I was part of a lot of consciousness and energy based schools and trainings, and I often felt like the space of the heart was missing. Like people would train themselves in a lot of meditation skills or in a lot of, psychology skills, but this way of like really letting ourselves feel in the depths of our hearts and like and accessing deeper forms of love and really studying love, that to me is in some ways just the path, is like how do we actually surrender the mind to the heart? How do we let the kind of egoic parts of us stay in check so that we can listen to something deeper? And that is really, 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 really hard. It's really hard. And it just requires so much patience and so much practice and so much reminders. I love that you said about relationships and reflection. And I really think that the principle of the heart is interconnection. So it's
Mhm.
hard to feel the heart if you're not interconnected. You know what I mean?
It's funny you say the word interconnected. I was like, yeah, interconnected within,
Hmm.
right? It's like, yeah, I feel like when you're talking about from myself, all these parts of myself that are kind of fragmented too. I feel they're not separate from me, like, this is bad. Get out. You're not part of God. And maybe there's so many ways that I'm doing that within my body. So many ways that I'm not connecting parts of my body with each other too. So when you brought up that word, I could feel how there's pieces within me that are not bridging
Hmm.
and not connected, so it feels like in with relational, but also internal relations within ourselves too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And this way that the world is not just happening outside of us, but actually there's a mirror internal world inside as well, where there's so much cosmic drama and so much reconciliation that's needed between all the different parts of us. I think we often think of ourselves as like a singular self because we have a name. So we're like, I am Hadar. That's who I am. But when it's like, well, who is Hadar? And starting that study, it's like, and teaching that came to me recently that I'm going to integrate into this God fellowship is the ways in which we're built out of contradictions and
Mhm.
actually how we require contradictions to exist. And that creates the friction that creates kind of the fire for us to be alive. And oftentimes when we face contradictions, we want to kind of make it all make sense to our minds. But I think that there's something about like learning how to be with our own contradictions, because
Mhm.
we don't just have one desire or one feeling or we have so many multiple parts of us, and it really is learning how to make space for all of them. And not necessarily in a way that they all just tie up in a nice bow and to say like, okay, this is who I am. Here's my bio. But here is my aliveness, Here are all the parts of me that are in motion and in activity with one another.
Yeah. And the ability to, I think for me, my journey has been to express it,
Hmm.
all the ways that I've held the emotion and controlled it within myself for the greater good of my family, for the greater good of my parents, for the greater good of my friends, and seeing that in the journey of meeting God, there for me has been, okay, well, it's about meeting myself and the truth of what is happening with me and allowing myself to feel that and then be in community with others who can presence that and be with me in that. And yeah, there's this like ability to express the truth and even that is a journey,
Hmm.
right? Even that is something that is another filter or another thing that is making it a little challenging to connect
Hmm.
with our interconnection, connection with other, and connection to God.
Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard? What are the blocks in the way there?
Um, that's a good question. For me, the blocks, I think and the word that comes is survival.
Mm,
um I think surviving to be in connection, like not wanting to lose my connection with other, not be the part of me that when sees other in a non you're not good, you're not God, get out of here, you're not part of connection anymore. I think within me there is like this part like, oh, I want to be in connection and I want to survive, and if I'm not in connection, I don't know what's going to happen with me. And I think I like fundamental survival of being in connection within myself has prevented me to feel, because oh, if I express that I feel that, what would this person think of me? What would my mom think of me? What would happen?
hmm.
How would things move if I suddenly say how I feel? And I think it started from when I was really, really little, very, very little, wanting to hang out with the adults, because it was just I'm an only child from my mom's side. So, oh, I want to hang out with my mom and my aunts. What does that mean? That means that I have to kind of be more mature or not be a baby, or I gotta suppress parts of me that are little because I want to stay in connection, because I want to be with them and I want to hang out with them. And I think that carried on through this. I want to be in connection, so I have to morph, or I want to be in connection, so I don't want to feel. And then the things that I wasn't allowing myself to feel had to go somewhere. And it's taking me forever to find them.
Mm,
Some I am unable to consciously locate, like I can't locate them with my mind. So body work has been great, like, spinal energetics, any kind of somatic, to find these spaces where all the stuff is hiding that I put in. I don't know how, body, soul, it's all amazing. I don't know how we do the things we do to survive. And that includes hiding things inside of me, not consciously. I have no idea how I did it or how it moves or how it organizes itself. But yeah, I feel like a lot of that is from wanting to stay in connection
hmm.
and afraid of, if I do express myself or if I say what I really want, what would you think of me, and would I lose will we lose our connection?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that so vulnerably. That's really
Mhm.
relatable. And I don't know, for some reason, it's like all these like Jewish mystical teachings are streaming for me when I speak to you. Uh,
Good. Let's go.
no, but I have this weekly Bible class, and we've been studying the creation story, and it's just so fascinating because there's the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve eat out of the tree, and God calls to them, and the actual first kind of interaction they have is that they hide. And it's so interesting, kind of looking at that from a psychology perspective is, okay, creation happened and then God called out and humans hid. What does it mean to hide from God? Because oftentimes we were like, God's hiding from us, But just this impulse that we have to, and then after the hiding, there's like the shame response and the guilt, and then it turns into blame. And then we have, all these complex psychological processes that develop that are layered. Um, but I've just been really thinking and observing both in myself and in humanity, this impulse that we have to hide, whether it's like hiding certain parts of us or like hiding truths from other people. Um, it's just it's really interesting because as you were saying, I think there's some fundamental belief that we just do not think we're okay as we are or something.
Yeah.
We don't think maybe we're divinely as we like we think we constantly need to change things about ourselves or about reality in order for things to be okay.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just something I've been really contemplating.
Hmm, interesting. This happens when we talk. Like these connections, but we're living separate lives. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the field of intelligence that's communicating between us.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
curious to ask you, like, I mean, I know this was a few years ago, so I don't know what memories kind of come up, but I'm curious before you did God Fellowship, like, who was God for you then, and who's God to you now, and what is your relationship to God?
Wow. Okay.
I know it's a big question. And thank you for sharing this publicly. I know a lot of, speaking of hiding, I think a lot of times people want to hide God actually and kind of hide
Yes.
relationship to God.
I don't talk about God all the time. I'm not like, God, yeah. So that's interesting how I'm hiding God in a way, I guess, or not being as vocal as I could be about it, or what is it that I need to feel like, what is it that I need to feel confident about it? But I think for me, I'm in a journey of that. Um, how were things before the God Fellowship? Where was I 5 years ago?
I know the time warp.
Um, I don't recall exactly what my relationship, I think my relationship with God was being activated, and it was activating it through the heart. When I did my hypnotherapy program and I was feeling into my body, and I was having this amazing relationship with my heart. And it felt like my heart knew the truth. And my practice in hypnotherapy was helping people connect to their hearts, to their wisdom, to listen, to make that bridge and connection to their heart and just listen, and viewing that spark of life as this miracle and divine God connection. And if we were to listen to it, what would we hear? What would it say? How would we experience this divine connection within us? So that's where I was before the fellowship, like kind of like had this God activation and was helping others kind of connect to that within themselves. But I wasn't, and then and I knew that we all carried that, and I knew that we were all God, but I didn't know how to practice that with other people. It was kind of like maybe something that I was thinking about or trying to experiment with, but never could fully like do it. So yeah, that's what was happening for me before the fellowship. Then when I was in the fellowship, it was really moving to me to be with others who felt the same, who wanted to explore that and be and see people in that way with that connection. But then we would see like all the different things that were kind of in and were showing up as we were trying to do this, like all these things just were coming through, and then even connecting with like how we expressed our divine. Like I remember one was like more flow. We all had different, what were the different structures that you gave?
Well,
Essence.
yeah, we did a grid of like or I mean the elements, I
Yeah.
think. We did earth, air, water, fire, but then we also did directions like up,
Yeah.
down, left, right, which I
Yeah.
think later on I added also the within, without, Z axis.
Oh. So all of that, it was like, okay, whoa. It's like, yeah, let's explore God. But it was like, no, there was all these other ways in which we were experiencing like the essence of each other and the difference of each other, but seeing like how someone who's in flow and someone who's in structure, like there's that friction. But then you were helping us kind of see the beauty in it, and that there's kind of like a balance within the polarities of the two energies. But and I think that really helped me with seeing people after the fellowship, of seeing their gifts and seeing their essence, um and holding that more with people. So I feel that that's the way in which it like strengthened that in me, the ability to see the gift, like be more gift oriented, instead of like, oh, you're so different, but instead of like, what is it about you that you love, that you're passionate about, that like, what is your flow, what is this gift that you bring into the world, what is your essence, what is your element, like what is your thing. And I think for me, that's what the God Fellowship strengthened, to see I could focus a lot on all the other aspects of a person, like, oh, they're so this and so that, but why can't that be their gift? Or why can't that be their calling? What, this thing that I don't understand, that's how they flow. Like, so just attuning, like just helping me kind of, uh, uh, yes, that voice is going to come in. Well, this is this, but then it's like, wait a minute, but yeah, that's this, but that's their gift. That's what they're good at. That's where they hold that space in the collective, right? It's not what I prefer, it's not how I flow, but there is beauty in that, and that could be here, and this could be there. It helps kind of, for me, help me organize a little bit of like, oh, if that's your strength, then let's like move it that direction, or you're really good at that. Well, you're good with planting and plants and growing things. Like, here's some earth, like at least I started seeing it that way. Like, um, yeah, just focusing on people's gifts and their essence more.
Hmm. Yeah, and almost what I'm hearing you say, that all people in some way belong to the God field, like,
Yeah.
and it's really moving to hear you say that, because I'm just remembering for me when I started my spiritual journey, this was so core, this realization that if I see others from this divine lens, it actually permissions them to become that, and to find that within themselves. But when I see them and criticize or judge or blame or all these other patterns we do, I actually impact them. I impact what's possible for them. I'm sending signals their way that are contracting. And, this is how I organize so much of my community events that I've been doing, is that like, okay, whatever it is that I'm organizing, whether it is spiritually based or it's dance based or it's whatever it is, it's like, what does it look like, or what does it feel like to activate a God field in which people can naturally find their access points to the divine? Because, I do believe that A, we all have those access points, but B, like that is our source of liberation, right? Like I actually believe when people are
Mm.
naturally connected to the divine, they are their best selves. They are naturally loving. They are naturally, all these things that we so often want to change the world into. I actually just think that we just need God to do that work, by allowing that to happen. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just what was coming to me as you were speaking.
Let me see if I get it, what you said. Um, you were talking about how you organize events, and how when you organize events, it's like, if there is almost like you create a calling or an intention. Is that what it felt like,
Yeah.
of people to connect to know that there's a space for them, that there is a that they belong in that space, and that when you're more connected to God. It allows you to fully be yourself and to know that you belong and that you're part of who you are is part of the great design that there's a place for you in that unfolding. And when I've worked with you in the past, when you've created events and invited me, there's always been a sense of like, what are you most excited to do? What is it that you want to bring? You always um appear with this like that, just tell me what you want, what you like, how you want to show up, what are you excited about, like, and there's always a way that there's a place for that.
Mm.
And every time that I've been in your presence, it's always like, what is it that you're excited to do, or what is it that you are passionate about, or what are you into right now that you want to share, right? Every time that I've connected with you, it's always been that invitation of sharing my excitement and my passion and what I'm into, because what I believe of what you're saying is that there is God there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just got a flashback to Feminism All Night where you gave
Yeah.
healing sessions, which is
Yeah.
my other baby project. But yeah, that was so beautiful where you came and just offered one-on-one healing support. And yeah, I think what you're speaking to is this trust, like I think that part of cultivating a relationship with God is also learning that actually there's so much for me, God and life are kind of the same word, God is life.
Mm.
And the intelligence of life is so profound and so deep. I mean, even if we spent every waking moment studying it, we would not even glimpse it, But because it's filled with wisdom, I can actually trust it. Like, I
Mhm.
don't need to control it. I don't need, like, if someone comes and wants to do something, I don't need to control them to do it because then it's going to end up being rigid and weird. But if I you know, if we're entering this God field together where we're in this shared container of life's intelligence, then naturally whatever comes through them is welcome and belongs and will only add to more light, and I actually rarely speak about this publicly, so I'm a bit shocked that we're even having this conversation. But yeah, it's a different way of thinking about organizing and building things. It's a lot of trust and it's a lot of surrender and it's a lot of like, even if my own personal mind has all these ideas or all these this, it's kind of like, well, what's most important is that the life force is present. So whatever helps
Mm.
people find that in themselves, that's the path.
I love you're saying that because I feel it. I feel it. I felt it. Feminism all night. I really did. There wasn't, it was like you trusted me. You trusted that I would show up. You knew that whatever would emerge would be beautiful. However, I set up my space, however I wanted, like, however, whatever structures I needed, whatever I wanted to create to support my offering, you were all for it. And yeah, that is to me a beautiful lesson and teaching of the more I do that, the more that God presence is with us and
Hmm.
it's allowing itself to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and that we get these messages actually inside of us all the time. And I'm just struck, I'm just had a vision of myself as a little girl because I think what you just described, like maybe the reason why I feel so committed to living in that way is because that's what I desired the most. I was like, can someone just trust me to like paint my canvas however I want to paint it? And just constantly feeling like limited and confined of like, no, it has to be, and I was like, no, I want to be creative and I want to do it in my way, and um yeah, to me, like part of being in relationship with God or with the life force is also trusting the signals that are happening inside of us of like, oh, like this is how I want to set up my space. This, I'm drawn to this thing, or I'm drawn to this color, or I'm drawn to, and to like trust those impulses, even if they don't make sense, because, just like life has so much depth of wisdom in it. I mean, that life is within us and we have that inside of us. And it's not always in this like clear logical form. It's sometimes in this like, hey, go to a mountain. And you're just like, why? And it's like, well, there's something there for you that will be revealed in that time. So, and yeah, gosh, this all these like biblical lines are keep coming up for me. But just like even when God first told Abraham to go, he said like go to the place that I will show you. God didn't say like go here or go there. It was like the place that I will show you. It was like this mysterious thing where it's kind of like you first have to say yes, and then things will be revealed. And I find that in the spiritual process, it's like you're never going to know the full plan. You're never going to know, like, okay, I'm going to start here and then I'm going to go there and then I'm going to go there. Like, you don't. You just maybe know the next right step. Maybe, but
Maybe.
yeah, if you're lucky. But if you get there, then new information will be revealed about the following steps. And, it's kind of like following the breadcrumbs. It's like following these like light signals that God places for us all over our psyche and our world. And we have to like slowly follow the trail and pick it up.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, as you were saying that, there was a question that emerged, and then there was a way that I answered the question myself, but I still want to ask it because I feel like there's a similarity. I feel like we kind of experience it in a similar way, that there's a quality.
Mhm.
How do you experience that calling, like that knowing? Like you don't know where it's gonna lead you, you don't know where it's going. How does it feel for you? How do you experience that, like, I'm gonna go there? Like, how do you experience that breadcrumb?
Yeah. Oof. Love that question. Um, well, first of all, I really experience it a lot with land. Like I mean, this sounds so basic to say, but sadly, we're just living in a world that doesn't fully comprehend this. But land has so much consciousness in it. Land has so much wisdom. And I think part of the pain of our time is the levels of rupture we have between body and land. Um, but even of just like visiting places, traveling, it's like I really don't go somewhere unless I feel called because I want to feel invited to a land. I'm not just going to come and show up and say, hey, I'm here. Like, I actually want to feel in relationship with the wisdom of that land. And um, I think, like, for me, it usually happens where it's like either in a dream or even like sometimes in a conversation with a friend. Like a lot of times it's also with other people. Like someone will bring up something. And then usually the way that I know it's a breadcrumb is if it's repeated a few times. Like if someone's telling me, oh, I just went to Spain, and then I hear it again. And then there's like a moment, that I feel like something, and that happens at least kind of 3 times, that's when I'm like, all right, this is a message. This is a signal.
Yeah.
This is a calling. And then I sit with it either in meditation or just feel into it. And then it's like, oh, yeah, there's a whole portal there for me. And I think, yeah, the reason why land came up is because I find that a huge part of spirituality, which has been for so long and still is, but I find that we just don't speak about it as much, is pilgrimage, is like it is travel to sacred spots to receive information, is to like leave our surroundings and go somewhere and transform ourselves and come back. And I think that kind of journey is so, 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 so sacred. Um, and it's something I've just kind of weaved into my life as like yearly pilgrimages to different places where the earth calls me. And I'm kind of going off a tangent, but I also want to hear your answer to this because it's such a good question. Um, but I think for me, it's also like this, how do I get outside of myself? How do I not just settle into what feels comfortable? And I mean that in a few ways, but most importantly around identity stuff. I think it's so easy to be attached to who we are based on where we come from or what we look like. And these are just external, they matter. Their significance, of course, and there's lineages and all of that. Um, but to truly discover God, we also have to be willing to let go of those levels. And yeah, I'm always curious to put myself in new conditions where
Mhm.
like no one knows anything about any part of my identity, and who am I then? And what comes out of me then? Um,
Mhm.
so I think it's kind of like this twofold answer. It's just like, yeah, learning to put myself in situations that I will learn about myself, that I will find different parts of me that, I might not know would come out. Um, yeah, and I think this is why I just really love like multi-religious study and approaches where it's just like there's so many different traditions and each tradition shows a different side of God. And when I'm in my own tradition, it's of course beautiful and all that, but then when all of a sudden there's another tradition that I didn't grow up with and I don't speak the language and I don't know the chants and I
Yeah.
but I'm there and I can all of a sudden feel things, there's a different way that kind of the divine energy comes through.
Mm. It's beautiful.
I want to know your answer too, though, because it's a juicy question.
Ah. Ugh. Yeah, I feel what you're saying about, yeah, pilgrimage. Pilgrimage. That word's been coming up for me. Second time.
Okay, wait for a third time and let
I know, I'm
me
waiting for a
know.
third time. And where to go? Yeah, I had a friend who did a mini pilgrimage to, is it the the walk to Santiago?
Hmm.
And it was amazing. They were getting all these downloads as they were walking through. And for me, it's a combination of different things. Um, First, sometimes I get information through my dreams. And sometimes the experience that I have in my dreams is so real. If it feels so, there's a quality in which it feels in my body, like it feels like a knowing, like I've always known. And there's an ease in that knowing, like it feels easeful and I know, and there's space and it feels slightly calm and empowered, like kind of almost like a little bit of empowerment, like ease, but it's not like I know. It's like, there's ease, there's like this empowerment, and it just feels right. Like there's a feeling that just feels right. It's not excited, actually. It's not like, oh, or like it's more grounded. There's like a feeling of like more, I don't know, grounded. And then later, all the other emotions will come. But at the beginning, there's this feeling of that. So to me, came with a dream. My doula work came through a dream that I was helping someone give birth. And I was their doula and I was supporting them through labor. And it felt that I had done it my whole life. That it wasn't something that was like, what is this? Or I wasn't in shock of it. It was just like I was flowing in it. We were both in the space of flow, and I felt that I've done it my whole life. And when I woke up from that dream, I was like, whoa, I never had a dream where I felt like I've done something that I'd never done before, but that I felt so natural to me. That was the first sign for me. Then I ran into a friend of mine that I had not seen in like a decade, who's a midwife. And I was like, I had this dream where I was helping someone give birth. She's like, oh my God, my friend has a doula training program connected to the hospital. Do you want it? Then I was like, oof, not only is my dream being recognized, but it's being taken to another level. Like, actually, if you're thinking about it or looking for it, here's an opportunity. I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to put myself out there and see what happens. And then being received. There's also a way in which I was being received by it. Like I applied and it's like, yes, you've been accepted for an interview. Like there was a way in which every step that I took, it was revealing a yes. And in that, like you said, Abraham didn't know, right? He was just following. I discovered so much about myself. It didn't mean that it was going to be this amazing, ecstatic, like incredible journey. It was like a deep journey of myself, of showing up in spaces where I thought I didn't belong.
Mm.
It meant that I had to witness things about the world and our medical system and birth that didn't even know existed. It was about understanding the relationship between birth and our relationship with the planet. Like it revealed hard truths and deep wisdom. So I think there's also this belief that in that following that breadcrumb or following that knowing that it's all going to be like this glorious, at least for me, it's like glorious, like it's actually depth and hard truths and meeting yourself in ways that you maybe like I met myself in ways I didn't ever knew I really met myself. So those are the ways that I like, yeah, this feeling, this knowing that feels right, like meeting with you, right? Being on this call. It feels right. I didn't feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna be on a call with Hadar. We're gonna talk about it. Like it was like, yeah, we're gonna meet and we're gonna talk. And I don't know what we're gonna talk about, but I'm trusting that this decision that I'm making and how I'm showing up is who I am at this moment. And it's the reality of my life and it's reality of the God fellowship and my connection with you. And okay, what if I step into this? What could be revealed to me from taking this step? What do I learn about myself and you and the world? And yeah, it's experimental for me.
Hmm.
But
Wow.
feeling that grounded, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna step in, see what happens. And then
Yeah.
there's also times where I'm really nervous and I still show up and I'm not getting that clear no, and I'm not getting the calm feeling, and I still show up and it's not bad because I've learned that just because I'm saying yes to something, I can still change my mind.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
can still say, "Oh, I actually stepped into this and it doesn't feel right for me right now. I'm gonna retreat." And that's been a new thing for me. Like, yeah, you can actually retreat. You can actually get out. You can actually say no. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I love everything you're sharing, and it's so profound. And I've definitely had that as well in my life where you have this dream and it feels so far away, and you're just like, this, I don't know what the hell this is. And then it almost immediately starts kind of unfolding through the help of other people. And then you're like, am I really ready for this? And then all of a sudden you have to confront yourself and all the blocks you have. And, dreams, it's like it's so interesting because we sometimes have these like deep desires for ourselves, but we're not really ready for them. And yeah, we really have to go through a process with ourselves. And I love how you said that that's actually part of that journey is confronting yourself. And I think ultimately it's like that's kind of what I hope God Fellowship is all about is this place that we can see. ourselves more clearly and where we get in our own way and how we can transform ourselves and um yeah, that we actually don't need to wait for anything else outside of us to change, that we already have so much material to work with
Yeah.
within us. There's so much, it's a whole rich inner world that I just feel has been, I mean, especially here in the US and in Western societies, there's so much like flattening of what happens inside of us. It's like we just have to perform outwardly and that's it, but every being has such a rich inner world of so much, histories and memories and ancestry and lineages and feelings and somatic responses and impulses and desires and patterns. And um, to me, that's kind of where the beauty of God is, and really this
Mm.
human process. And even the parts that feel so like ugly, like our controlling parts or our defensive parts or, you know, manipulate or all these human patterns that we might feel are gross and disgusting and get them away from us, it's like when we do that, we're actually contracting how God moves through us. And what
Mm.
does it look like to kind of look inside of us with eyes wide open? You know what I mean?
Mm. Yes. Yeah. Mm.
Well, thank you so much, Bere, for coming on. Is there anything we haven't chatted about that you want to chat about? It's been a deep dive here.
No, I'm perfectly. I feel that it was such an honest, unplanned, vulnerable, as real as we are in this moment in our lives. And yeah, it feels beautiful. Nothing else to
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on. It's truly such a gift to me, and I loved hearing you share so
add.
vulnerably about yourself and your process. And I find that every time I speak to you, I leave feeling more love in my heart. So that is in good part to who you are. You really just embody a lot of love, and I definitely feel it. So thank you for being you.
Thank you. Thank you for receiving me and trusting my wisdom and just who I am as a person and always seeing God in me and allowing me to flow and be myself. It's a true gift. I thank you for that, Hadar.
Oh.
Yeah.
And for the listeners, if you want to join God Fellowship, a little plug that the next fellowship starts January 19th. There's two cohorts on Sundays and Wednesdays, and all information can be found at malchut.one, and the links are all in the description. So, yeah, come join the fun of exploring God in community and in relationship and with the self. So, thank you for listening.
Thank you.